Welcome back to the journey into Forever is the Soul. This week we are on chapter 16, which is titled The Making of a Day. And the subtitle is Love Springs from Within Us and Surrounds Us All. So let's see where Andrew goes this week. Enjoy.
Moving on now, chapter 16, The Making of a Day. The Making of a Day. Love springs from within us and surrounds us all. Love springs from within us and surrounds us all. It's really talking about the energy field, but it's also talking about thought. Thought moves through us in a way. And it's kind of funny because there's so many different ways of interpreting thought. What is thought? We've talked about algorithms and things of this sort, which are necessary in order to create a language that we can associate with thought itself. But it's kind of like as you go into the whole idea of conduit, and this machine that we live in is a conduit to an energy field. Last week we talked about consciousness and created an association with consciousness and God. And you've often heard me say, I'm just a small aspect of the totality. That's a reference to the ego. The ego is a small aspect of the totality of what I am. But what I am most is consciousness, and consciousness is composed of either complete absence, which is, it can be conscious when you go into a meditative state and you just really have a mantra, for example, and you're just repeating a mantra, you're really focused at a candle. You may not be thinking, but you're just experiencing input from whatever the stimulus is that you're staring at. But it's not really a thinking process as much as it's just a passive observational process, which allows the energy field to become very still, which is why we feel very passive when we meditate. So when you look at love springs from within us, or what was the statement? Sorry, I should have kept it open. Giving me a second. But yeah, consciousness, so much of what I'm talking about, and really what the book is about, is consciousness from two different perspectives. One's human and one is, fictional, because it's all tied into what is spirit and what is spiritual consciousness. And ultimately where the book goes and the story is going to is a blending of both. So when I say things like to die without dying, to be able to liberate yourself from the tyranny of your ego, it's that idea of being able to move into that energy field, that consciousness. Love springs from within us. Okay, so love in that context, love is the absence of fear. Very, very, very tricky to get to a point of just truly being in love, the making of a day, with the moment that is being presented to you. So again, in our culture and our programming and our algorithms are so busy pushing us all the time that the sense of oneness or that sense of wholeness that you can have when you bring your consciousness to a very passive place, where really the thoughts that you're having are thoughts that you choose to have, meaning you think what you want to think as opposed to reacting to whatever the stimulus is. So when you kind of tune into the fact that fear and love are battling it out, I like Christo Berg has a song called Spanish Train, and one of the lines are the Lord and the devil are now playing chess in my brain, which is basically this whole battle between good and evil, negative, positive, fear, love, if you will. So if you can tune into and just bring your thoughts to, I call it higher calibrations, meaning you're not thinking fearful thoughts. There's no fear in you at all. You're just kind of, okay, this is life, this is my life. You might have noise that goes, well, what about? Well, it can't really be this simple. That just to be able to move into a plane of experience where you're not trying to control anything with your thoughts, you're just being with your thoughts, opens you up to a much higher level of intellectual and emotional function. And I say intellectual and emotional because we're so tied. Our thoughts create our emotions create our thoughts. That's all tied into the limbic system. And limbic system's concerned about one thing primarily, and that's keeping this little organism that the soul is living in alive and well and functioning. But it also works against us in lots of ways, because it's what creates within us the blocks and the resistances and the expectations that impair us from truly being in that feeling of oneness. So what's going on in the book at this time? I do find talking about this kind of tricky, because I want to tell you what's going on in the book, because it's really cool. But I don't want to give the story away. So there's four main characters. You've probably heard me throw out names as we go on. Dennis and Maria, they're dead. They're the energy. And Charlotte and James. So I'm not even going to tell you much about Charlotte and James, other than to say that they're learning to do, in essence, the same thing that Dennis and Maria are learning to do. So it's kind of parallel perspectives. One is very earthbound. It's a young couple finding themselves through each other. The other level is a soul that's emerging into a much bigger picture, as it experienced sort of a narrative coming through chapter 15 when God entered the cave. The whole idea, once they had released their egos and all that the ego is made of, all the algorithms and so on and so on, then they began to see this big picture. And then even from that big picture, they understood the role, algorithmic roles of things like religion, structure, social structure, all this kind of stuff. And in many ways, how essential those elements of their journey, spiritual journey, were important. We have evolved throughout these centuries, all these different systems, each system a little bit more evolved than the next, always leading us towards a deeper comprehension of consciousness. So on a very simple level, simple human level, Charlotte and James, these other two characters who are alive, who are in ego, who are both tuned to a medium, we'll say. James is a musician and Charlotte is an artist. So they're both people that have a creative understanding and have, in many ways, built their lives around their creativity, as opposed to conforming into structural conditioning. Oh, you need to be this in order. An artist can't make a living. That's ridiculous. So Charlotte is in defiance of that program and is making a living as an artist. James is a little different. He's been a traveling musician all his life, and he knows how to make money with music. And what they're doing, because they're both fairly creative, they're using that creativity to change the dynamics of what a relationship is to each other, by examining to some degree the past, what our past relationships, what did they do to the algorithms that create resistance blocks that stop love from flowing within. Charlotte's a little bit fearful at first, okay? She's had some injuries, we'll say. And James has been more predatorial, and he doesn't want to be predatorial. So there's this sort of balancing going on in their energy, as simultaneously on the other plane, Dennis and Maria are doing the same thing. There's this blending of energy. One is tied to energy, one is tied to mass. So the reflection in this chapter is between energy and mass, but it's all about the execution of love, and in that, the transcension of fear. So much easier, in a way, for Dennis and Maria to transcend fear, because they no longer have a limbic system utilizing humanistic algorithms to evoke those emotions that we call in the human world fear. So for them to open into that vastness, that massive consciousness I was talking about last week, God consciousness, well, that's where they are. It takes time in the afterlife to assimilate, for the ego to assimilate into its totality. That, to me, is without question. I really feel that. And I think we're all doing that even in our human world, and I think that's the point of the chapter, is that Charlotte and James are really moving beyond fear to move into a deeper sense of what is love. I think the key to being able to sustain a healthy and vibrant understanding or feeling as to what it is to be who we are as individuals in this time of massive change is to understand your own fear. That's obvious, and we all have it, let's face it. Understand our capacity to love, and we all have that, and it can be a bit dicey at times, and it causes caution, which then brings us back to fear. But really, the place that we are meant to live, and I truly believe this to be true, is right now. Consciousness is right now. Before I sat down to do this, I was doing a whole bunch of other things. Now I'm doing this. My consciousness is here in this moment, reflecting what I feel, what I see, what I sense, what I hear in my head outward to you. And that's just learning to flow with life. Doesn't mean that I'm always in this channel. It means that I can tune into a place within myself as long as I'm willing to give up all my earthly concerns and live in the moment. And I think that so much of even what I talked about last week, the ability to get into an alternative perspective, which when you start to brush up against it, I say see into the invisible, because when you start to brush up against it, you being ego, start to brush up against self, true self, it seems very foreign at first. And I've worked with a lot of people coaching where it's almost like, well, it can't be this real. It can't be this. Well, why can't it be this? And the reason it can't be what it is because you don't have algorithms to support what it can be. The algorithms that are necessary to really enforce a very open consciousness it comes through some discipline, a balance between the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere, stuff I've talked about in the past, pertinent to other chapters in the book. So there's so much going on in our world today, and inadvertently and completely unbeknownst to my own ego, I think for me anyway, Forever is the Soul is a encapsulation. It takes a lot of information and brings it into just a fictional story that kind of meanders between two planes, physical and spiritual, or as I say in the book, energy and mass, and tries to bring forth a conclusion that I believe is necessary for all of us, and that is to find passivity in who we are as a very overstimulated species right now, to find pacification so that we can open up to the next level of what it is to be human. And I do think, and I think the book certainly reflects that, is that we are on an evolutionary journey right now that's very condensed. So we're all in this together. I've said that a number of times too. We're all in this together. To me, it's the most amazing time. If I could say I remember past lives, which would be a lie because I don't remember past lives, not specifically. I'm sure I lived in Egypt sometime, or maybe I was in the Civil War in the state. I don't know, and it doesn't really matter. What matters is I'm here right now, back to the point of being able to like as the title says, the making of a day. The making of a day is just, what are you doing with your consciousness today? Is it going on about stuff that doesn't matter? Is it reiterating the stuff that didn't matter yesterday that was a reiteration of the day before? Which is very common. We all do it. When I'm coaching people, it's amazing. You start to think about what you've thought about over the last 2 or 3 months, and it's the same stuff over and over and over. Maybe a little different voice, but same stuff. So as we learn to pacify, we learn to pacification, in the simple essence of pacifying, that noise stops. And when that noise stops, consciousness is going to be doing something. And that's where you start to brush up against, I call it in the book, I call it the veil. You start to brush up against the veil and you start to see other things. And then, of course, your algorithms are going to go, well, that's just imagination, it's fantasy, it's silly. And it's like, yeah, it is. It is. It's just silly. What do you want to do with the images that come to you? The scary images, we can spend countless hours thinking about those things. Why not think about or let yourself feel the images, the feelings, the intuition that I believe comes through the right. I know that my ego didn't write this book, not my ego in the conventional sense, but my soul, or my capacity or perceived capacity to share my consciousness, or my consciousness with my soul, is a blending of ego, algorithmic patterning, and spirit, creativity, energy fields. So again, I say this all the time, it's a neat chapter. I like it, or I wouldn't have published it. And I think it tells a lot of cool things to people that are open and receptive to learning to understand within themselves their capacity to, I like from a biological perspective, it's almost like, well, there's the whole brain experience, which is left and right hemisphere. Heart center opens because of passivity. The frontal cortex expands, awareness expands, and all of a sudden life is different. And that's really what I'm trying to, well, that's what Charlotte and James are learning. They're going, oh, it's not that hard. And those are kind of my thoughts on chapter 16. Again, I want to thank everyone for coming along. It seems like there's about consistently 80, 85 people every week watching these videos, and I'm honored to have people actually take an interest in the work that I'm doing and the work that Elise is helping me with. There's 5 more to go, and not sure what I'll tell you about those 5 chapters, but I'm sure something will come through. And as I say, always I beg every once in a while for comments and stuff, either through Messenger or just, if you like the video, go like. It just helps. And one other thing, and just a thought, on Facebook, there is the ability to, do a little, what's it called? If you like the book, you can make comments about the book, sort of like little reviews. There's a couple of them there already. But if you've read the book and enjoyed the book, just to share your thoughts or your feelings about what you discovered from reading Forever would be good for me, and it would be good for you to probably articulate it, but it'd be good for other people that are perhaps looking for a book like this one. Have a great week, and talk to you next week. Bye-bye.